And I just want to, at this stage, read out a statement from Frankie, Bontemps, a constituent of my honourable friend from Crawley. I had a long, he is an NHS worker working at the hospital in Crawley. He's from the Chagos Islands. I had a long and somewhat emotional telephone conversation with him last night. Tremendous man who I'm looking forward to meeting in the House of Commons. This is what he writes. Mr. Bontemps from the Chagos Islands. I am a founding member of Chagossian Voices. I don't agree that islands should go to Mauritius. Chagossians have never been consulted at any stage, and Chagossians were never represented at the International Court or before. Chagossians have been used by the Mauritian Government at the ICJ to get sympathy by providing an account of suffering. Then they were dismissed as Mauritians of Chagossian origin. They have erased our identity. This is the allegation. They have erased our identity. The Mauritian government was also complicit in the exile of Chagossians and the sale of the islands in 1965. And this is a fascinating concept. Mauritius took our money in 1965. They took our £3 million of taxpayers' money. Think to yourselves for a moment how much £3 million was in 1965. They took our money as final settlement for these islands. They were complicit in helping the removal of the Chagossians from Diego Garcia and the other islands. And now, 60 years on, they want to overturn that agreement and they want to take these islands away from us, islands which are over 2,000 kilometers away from Mauritius. He goes on to say Chagossians do not feel they are Mauritians. Chagossians feel they are still being exploited by the Mauritian government. Mauritius wants sovereignty of the islands for financial gain, and I do not think there will be resettlement of Chagossians under Mauritian rule. And he goes on to say this, and this is very evocative, very powerful, very emotional. It is wrong to describe Chagossians as Mauritians. Their origins are as slaves from Africa and Madagascar. The Chagossians have been there for 5 or 6 generations with their own language and culture, food and music traditions. It is a remote and unique culture, different to Mauritius. Then he says the judgment of Lord Justice Laws and Mr. Justice Gibbs in November 2000 said Chagossians are the belongers on the islands. As belongers, Chagossians should be their own deciders of their futures, not the Mauritian government. Self-determination should be for Chagossians, not for Mauritians who have their own island more than 2,000 kilometers away. So far, only the United Kingdom and Mauritius have been consulted. Chagossians have never been allowed to participate in decisions about their future, from exile until now. Chagossians should now be asked to decide the future of the islands. Chagossians should be around the table. It's our human right. He then goes on to say, Mr. Bontemps then goes on to say that he has written a letter to the Foreign Secretary asking for these assurances, dated the 11th of November 2022, and they have not as yet received a reply from the Foreign Secretary to that request.
I would like to conclude my remarks by saying that, as my constituents has already been referenced, Frankie Bontemps has said of Chagossian Voices, the vast majority of the Chagos community that I represent, and I probably represent the largest Chagos community anywhere in the world, the vast majority, despite the appalling history that this country has visited on them, want to remain British, and they must be consulted.
I've taken over the chairmanship of the APPG, and for 8 years sat on it. We have campaigned religiously to highlight the plight of this community. And I will meet with Chagossian Voices next week, again to hear firsthand about their thoughts on these negotiations. But in my first act as chairman, I wrote to the Foreign Secretary, Ms Cummins, and he has now kindly agreed to come and address the committee early in the new year. So we will get first-hand information about where these negotiations are up to and what the intent in the British state is. But for those of us, many of us around this table who've campaigned for years on this subject, let's make sure we put the Chagossians, their rights, their dignity at the heart of everything we do going forward.